Hello, I'm Dr. Bernadine Pinto. I'm a professor and associate dean for research at the College of Nursing at the University of South Carolina, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. The South Carolina Cancer Alliance asked me to present on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is about physical activity, but more specifically today, about how to stay active inside and outside the pandemic box. Let me introduce myself a little bit further. For the past 25 years, I've been working with patients, mostly middle-aged, older adults, those with cardiovascular disease and those with cancer, to become active and to stay active. As a result of the work that I was doing, I was invited to be among the experts who met to discuss and develop the first exercise guidelines for cancer survivors in the US in 2010. And those guidelines were updated in 2019. So I'm very pleased today to talk about how you might stay active despite some of the restrictions created by the pandemic. So today my presentation will cover three separate topics, but all related, of course. One is, why is physical activity important? Second, what are the challenges for becoming active or staying active during these times? And what can you do about it? So let's get started. For a very long time, when patients were going through cancer treatments and afterwards, they were basically told to take it easy, that you need to rest. That unfortunately creates what I call a disuse syndrome, in the sense that if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So when people restrict their activity and stay sedentary, they're more likely to lose muscle strength, their range of motion and flexibility decreases, they lose fitness, and they are at increased risk for osteoporosis. And there are some cancer patients who are on hormone treatments that actually do increase their risk for osteoporosis. So staying sedentary is not going to help for that particular problem. Many cancer patients experience excessive fatigue, and that can last for many years after the cancer treatments are done. So if someone is very sedentary, has lost range of motion, has lost muscle strength, and then develops a sense of, I'm not as healthy as the next person, I am more disabled. And when that individual does engage in activity because of the loss of fitness, etc., they are more likely to injure themselves. So this is not a very healthy pattern for cancer patients. On the other hand, physical activity actually does help cancer patients recover. It helps them to improve physical functioning, and very importantly, it helps to manage fatigue. Now let's take a deeper dive on the benefits of physical activity. We know that physical activity reduces the risk for many chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, like diabetes and osteoporosis. It also helps to manage the disease once it has been diagnosed in the patient. So keep that in mind for those of you who may have some of these chronic health problems. We know that exercise helps with weight control along with managing your diet. It helps to manage your mood. In fact, usually some people say, well, I wasn't in a mood to take a walk, but then when I did take a walk, I felt better. Physical activity always helps people to feel a little better because it helps to release what I call the feel-good hormones like dopamine, serotonin, and others. It has been found to improve quality of life in patients with many different diseases, including cancer, and also very importantly for cancer patients, becoming and staying physically active can prevent the recurrence of cancer or prevent a future cancer. Now, even if you were not active before your cancer diagnosis, if you did become active afterwards and you're staying active, that can certainly help to protect you from a future cancer. Now let's shift gears a little bit and take a look at what we know right now about adults who are at increased risk for more severe COVID-19. And these are people who have obesity, who have been diagnosed with high blood pressure, who have cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes. People who are older than 65 years old, people who have a compromised immune system, and we know that cancer patients going through treatment do have a compromised immune system, and people who belong to racial and ethnic minority groups. Now on this slide, I've highlighted for you the 4 conditions that place people at higher risk for severe COVID-19, but they're also the same conditions that physical activity can either reduce the risk for or help in the management of those diseases. So this is very important to keep in mind. Now, when I talk about activity, what exactly am I talking about? I would like to echo the guidelines that were developed in 2019 by the American College of Sports Medicine. These are the guidelines, exercise guidelines for cancer survivors. And basically the guidelines emphasize that people should try to get to 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity activity during the week. Now, what does moderate intensity activity mean? It means activities which increase your heart rate a little bit, makes you breathe a little bit faster, but that you should be able to carry on a conversation. The guidelines also recommend strength training 2 to 3 times a week. Now, some of you may look at this and say, well, I can't get to 150 minutes right away, and that's quite okay. What I would strongly recommend is start at whatever level you are able to handle. So if it's 60 minutes for the week, go ahead and start there. And over time, gradually increase until you get to 150 to 300 minutes. But the important takeaway message is that some activity is better than no activity at all. So that is the very important message that I hope will resonate with you. Now, looking more specifically at how moderate to vigorous physical activity can help during this time of the pandemic. One of the reasons is one that I've just discussed with you, and that is it helps to treat coexisting chronic conditions that place people at increased risk for more severe COVID-related symptoms. Second, we know that physical activity, especially moderate physical activity, can improve immune functioning. It reduces inflammation and helps your immune system. Physical activity has also been shown to reduce acute respiratory illness, the incidence of that illness, the duration, the severity. Physical activity helps in management of stress and anxiety, depression, and we all know that we are experiencing considerable stress related to this pandemic, financial stress, stress related to homeschooling of children, and many other issues. So physical activity, while it cannot resolve those problems right away, can help to manage your response to some of these stressors. Another very important contribution of physical activity, and one that I actually didn't know much about, was that moderate intensity physical activity can actually improve your response to vaccines. There was a study that was done among older adults and who were regularly active. They were taking part in moderate intensity activity, and their response to vaccines was about 30 to 100% better than a control group that didn't engage in physical activity. So this is important for us to keep in mind, especially when a vaccine for COVID-19 is developed. All right, so let's move to the next subtopic, and this is what are we facing in terms of challenges for physical activity during this pandemic. Now, in general, this data have shown that COVID-19 and the restrictions have led to increased isolation for people. For many, it has increased anxiety and worry about catching the disease, financial stress, other issues. For some patients, unfortunately, they've delayed seeking medical treatment. They're avoiding hospitals, not always showing up for appointments. Cancer screenings have dropped. So this is not a healthy trend. We've also seen a decrease in healthy behaviors, and I will discuss that specifically in terms of physical activity. And on the other hand, there's been an increase in unhealthy behaviors. People are at home, they are snacking more, they are in front of the television or in front of their tablets and their smartphones, so it has increased inactivity. We also know that in some areas, parks, gyms, trails have been closed, and those are areas or regions where people are physically active. Interestingly, some data have shown that people who have self-isolated or who are in quarantine they tend to report higher depression and more anxiety compared to people who are living in areas where social distancing is required. So these are important data that are showing us the impact of the pandemic on our mental as well as our physical health. Okay, let's talk about physical activity in particular. This was a study that was done in Europe for the most part. It was done in early April, and there were over 1,000 participants. And what they found in this survey was in that week of early April, there was a decrease in the frequency of physical activity, 24% decrease, a 33% decrease in the duration of physical activity. And on the other hand, there was an increase in the amount of time people were spent sitting. It's 28% increase, which is something like from an increase of 5 hours of sitting a day to 8 hours of sitting a day. So again, this is not a healthy trend. In the US, again, in early April, there was a survey of over 3,000 adults aged between 18 and 75. And what they found was for those individuals who had been active before COVID, there was a 32% decrease in their physical activity. For those who weren't active before COVID, they stayed the same. Those who were not exercising at guidelines and at the same time it had increased their screen time, they showed worse depression, loneliness, and stress. So here again, we have the association of inactivity and poorer mental health. In mid-March, Fitbit data showed that there was a 12% mean decrease in step count in the US. And this is across all 50 states. So clearly, the pandemic resulted in a reduction of physical activity for many people. So when you think about COVID-19 and the restrictions, plus people who have gone through cancer treatments or are going through cancer treatments, it has resulted for many people in becoming almost a couch potato, where you have a cluster of unhealthy behaviors. You have people lying down, watching their televisions or their smartphones or their tablets, eating unhealthy foods, perhaps also engaged in increased alcohol intake. So this is not a very healthy trend at all. And what I would like to convey to you is this does not have to be the case at all. So and there are things that we can do about it, especially in terms of physical activity. So the unhealthy cycle that has resulted during the pandemic is people are staying at home, they are inactive, that increases their anxiety and depressed mood, then they are even more inactive, and that creates or increases existing physical or mental health problems. So people are caught in this negative cycle. And what I want to emphasize is let's focus on breaking out of this inactivity so that we can bring this negative cycle to an end. Yes, absolutely, we are living in challenging times, but let us look at that as an opportunity to be creative and to come up with alternative ways to become and staying active. So the last section of my talk will focus on what you could do. So let's think of it in terms of where you are. So you may be one of those people who are currently not active, but you'd like to start. What I would recommend is that you check first with your physician and see if it's okay for you to begin a program of regular activity and ensure that you're exercising safely. Now, when you get started, set for yourself small, achievable goals, specific goals. So don't worry about the 150 minutes. If you can take 10 minutes a day, that would be an excellent place to begin. Or you may decide, I want to just identify 4 ways that I can increase my step count for the next week. If you can achieve 2,000 steps a day, that's what your goal would be. But make sure that it's feasible for you and that you can be successful. And make sure the goal fits for you. It doesn't matter what the next person is doing. Find a goal that will work for you. Then choose an activity that you might enjoy. Interestingly, many people don't realize that dance is a form of physical activity. So you may be interested in taking up Zumba, or you might be interested in shooting hoops with your children or with your grandchildren, or you may want to walk for an errand. So choose something that you might enjoy. Now, if it's an activity that involves equipment, make sure you have it. So if you want to bike, you gotta make sure you have a bike in working condition, you have a bike helmet if you're biking outdoors. Now, some people find physical activity somewhat boring, especially if they are indoors. So think of adding a distraction to it. Watch television. You could listen to a podcast or an audio book as well. So to make it interesting for you. For others, it's more about exercising with someone. So you might want to find a buddy to exercise with, either virtually or in person. Or you could join a team, and there are many teams virtually. People like that because it helps to pass the time when they're exercising together. It also makes them more accountable. Once you've achieved that goal that you set, whether it be 500 steps that day or 2,000 steps a day, whatever that goal was, reward yourself. Maybe it would be a reward such as calling up a friend who you haven't spoken to for a long time. So think of a reward to encourage yourself to keep moving. Now, you might be in another group of people. You may be someone who is active, but not as active as you would like to be or should be. Usually when patients tell me that, it's because they have let time get away from them and they forgot to be active. So try to set up for yourself a system of reminders. You can use your smartphone, you can use your wearable device to prompt you, especially if you've been sitting too long, and to remind you that it's time to move. Another important tip that I would like to share with you is that some people believe that they need to find more time in their day for activity. What I would recommend is try to work activity into your day instead of trying to find more time. So for example, you could walk in place during commercials while you're watching television. Another piece of advice for people who are working from home, the time that you used to spend commuting, you could use that for physical activity. And that is much more meaningful for people and much more manageable than trying to find an extra 20 minutes to exercise. Another key point is find the time of day that works best for you in terms of physical activity. For some people, that's at the beginning of the day because it helps to energize them and get them started for the day. For others, it's around mid-afternoon when they're feeling somewhat sluggish and they need a boost of energy. So you may need to figure out which time of the day works best for you. Now, you might be someone who's already active and you want to continue to be the trailblazer that you are. So for those people, what I recommend is you may want to introduce a new activity in your routine or change it somewhat to make it more exciting. You could set a new goal for yourself. Many of the activity trackers provide you various badges, or you could join a charity event and exercise for that cause. It could be a virtual walk or a virtual run, whatever works for you. You can become a mover or shaker, become a role model for others, motivate your family or your friends to become active. You could set up a team and compete with others. So think of interesting ways to keep yourself engaged and to have physical activity interesting for you rather than something that becomes very old and boring. Okay, so let's think more closely about exercising in your home environment. And this is especially important if you are at high risk for COVID-19. Begin by creating some space in your home. Clear some space with maybe your spare room, it may be a corner of your living room or your yard where you can be physically active. You could dance to your favorite music, you could do some Tai Chi or yoga, or if your children or grandchildren have left some exercise games around, you could you could participate in those. You could walk briskly around your house. If you have stairs, you could go up and down a couple of times a day, or you could involve your family members. So think of what you can do inside your home or right around your home environment. One of the barriers that many people often tell us that why they can't be active is because of the weather. Well, if you're exercising indoors, that particular reason or excuse won't hold much weight. So think about what you can do in your home, and it is so exciting these days to see the range of online exercise videos. You can go to YouTube, your local gym. They offer a variety of exercise videos, but find something that's appropriate for you. So for example, breast cancer survivors, Turning Point Atlanta has an excellent array of exercise videos that are appropriate for patients who have gone through breast cancer treatment. When you use a search engine, you may want to enter keywords like yoga for beginners or Pilates for aged 50 and above. Find something that fits where you are coming from and what your level of functioning is. If you have home exercise equipment, of course, treadmill or elliptical, you could use that. You could also use your own body weight or resistance bands for resistance training in the home. And resistance bands are not expensive, and those are very useful for many patients who have had surgery and need to maintain range of motion. Exercising indoors. The home fitness app world has exploded. Some of these apps do require equipment and can be expensive, but they help people because there is an instructor that they can see, and they can also see other people participating in the class. So it's helpful for that social support element or even for competition. There are other home fitness apps where no equipment is required. As I mentioned, the YouTube workouts, your local gym may be offering certain classes. The range of activities is just overwhelming, and so you can change your activity from week to week to find something that really is engaging for you. And these apps are free. Now, some people, of course, would prefer exercising outdoors. And you can exercise in your neighborhood as long as you stay 6 feet away from others, or you're with your own family. That 6 feet social distance is not required. You can use driveways, cul-de-sacs, any area where it is safe. If the local parks and trails have opened, then and it's easy for you to get to them, then that's a great place to exercise. Ideally, go there at off-peak times so that there aren't any crowds. And it's amazing what nature can do for us when we're out there breathing fresh air and among the trees, and to see the change of seasons wherever you may be. If masks are required, do use those that don't interfere with breathing. Other outdoor activities, go for a bike ride. This photograph is of a colleague of mine, and she takes part in a bike ride in the Blue Ridge Mountains for a charitable cause. You can, if you have a lawn or a yard, you can work on maintaining them. And according to the seasons, you can change the flowers you have. You can play active games with your family. But just make sure that you wear a mask when you can't maintain social distance. The one reminder is to avoid large groups, especially if it is a walking group or a cycling group. Avoid large groups during this time of the pandemic. And as I wind down my presentation, I want to emphasize that activity can be threaded during your entire day. So whenever you've been sitting for too long, break that up, stand up, do some chores, get up and walk in place during commercials, walk to the mailbox, take micro breaks of activity during the day, rather than just confining your activity to a walk or a run at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. Think about activity during your 16-hour day. If you have a dog, they're great exercise buddies because they're always looking for someone to take them for a walk. So think of your dog as well during this time. And yes, there are some of us who don't like exercising alone and like group-based activities. Unfortunately, those are not advisable at this time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become socially isolated. You can use FaceTime or Zoom or other platforms to connect with other people, to post your progress, to motivate others, to challenge others. You can also reach out to your trainer if you have one. So there are ways in which you can utilize technology to stay connected and to reach out to others and have that social support that is key for many people to stay active. And then finally, I've been talking mostly about leisure time activities, but there are other activities at home of daily living that actually involve moderate intensity activities. So sweeping floors, vacuuming, cleaning windows, washing the car. These are things that you do in or around your house. They may not be leisure time activities, but they are indeed moderate intensity activities. So when I mentioned micro breaks during the day for activity, it could be one of these activities that you choose to engage in during your micro break. Okay, so I've come to the end of my presentation, and I want to thank you for watching this video. I want to thank the South Carolina Cancer Alliance for inviting me to share my thoughts with you on this topic. And I always like to end with a bit of humor. So I'm sharing with you this quote that I saw on a billboard somewhere: refusing to go to the gym is a form of resistance training. So on that humorous note, I will end here. And if you have any questions or would like to contact me, you can see my email address in the corner. So thank you all so much, and I wish you all good health wherever you are.